Today, we're diving into a text that doesn't just offer up a theory, it literally issues a formal charge against our accepted reality. It's called the Scientific Indictment, and our goal here is to walk through the key pieces of evidence it lays out in its case against, well, pretty much everything we think we know.
Right from the very first page, this thing sets a seriously high-stakes tone. I mean, it kicks off with this stark warning, framing itself not as a story but as a key that once you turn it will completely change how you see the world. That's a bold claim, so let's see what kind of case it builds.
So what's the central charge here? Well, the core argument, the primary indictment, is that the story we've all been told about who we are, where we come from, and what we're actually capable of isn't just incomplete. It's a deliberate fabrication designed to keep us from realizing our true potential.
Now, the first major piece of evidence in this indictment doesn't start in ancient history. Nope. It starts with modern neuroscience and a pretty radical claim about the biological hardware sitting right inside your own skull.
The source asks us to really think about this for a second. What if intuition, that gut feeling, isn't just a metaphor? What if it's the product of a specific, physical, measurable structure that's actually built into your brain? To explain this, the text introduces a concept it calls the receiver phenotype. It's this idea that some people are literally born with different neurological hardware that's physically better at picking up on patterns and information that our five normal senses just can't detect, almost like a built-in antenna for reality itself.
Okay, so you might be thinking, where's the proof? Well, to back this up, the indictment points to the work of a very mainstream scientist, Dr. Garry Nolan, a respected immunologist at Stanford. He studied the brains of these experiencers. We're talking high-functioning people, often in government or intelligence, who just seem to have this receiver phenotype.
So what did he find? Something pretty remarkable. A real, statistically significant physical difference in their brains. It was a dense, overdeveloped bundle of neurons connecting two deep brain structures, the caudate nucleus and the putamen. And these are parts of the brain that are already linked to things like intuition and picking up on patterns subconsciously.
And here's the kicker. According to the source, Dr. Nolan himself described this unique brain structure as, and this is a quote, an antenna. An antenna that seems built for accessing information that is not local to the brain. In other words, we're talking about data that isn't coming from your memories or your five senses, but is being received from somewhere else. This is Exhibit A, physical proof, it claims, of a human antenna.
Okay, so we've got the biological hardware, right? Now hold on, because this is where the indictment takes a really dramatic turn. It argues that this antenna is actually a relic, a piece of advanced hardware that was fully functional in a lost chapter of our history, an age of giants.
And this puts us right at a major crossroads between two totally different stories. The official version is a nice, clean, straight line from ape to us. But the indictment claims our past was way more complex. A world where our ancestors walked alongside a whole bunch of other human species, and yes, that includes giants.
The text makes a pretty logical point here. Before you can even begin to consider the evidence for 10-foot-tall humans, you have to break free from that simple evolutionary chart we all learned in school. You have to open up to the idea that human diversity was way more radical than we're told. And it uses accepted science to make its case. It points to Homo Floresiensis, the 3-foot-tall hobbits of Indonesia, which is a confirmed, real human species. It also points to the Paracas skulls from Peru with their weirdly elongated shape and much larger brain volume. The source basically asks, if those can be real, why is a 7 or 8-foot version of a human so impossible?
So then the indictment goes back and looks at ancient texts, but with a totally new lens. It presents this famous biblical passage describing giants in the land of Canaan, not as a myth, but as a literal eyewitness report. The absolutely terrified account of normal-sized people coming face-to-face with a race of titans.
But this brings up the big question, right? If giants were real and our ancestors saw them, where's all the proof? Where are the bones? And this is where the indictment alleges a full-blown conspiracy, a systematic erasure of all that evidence.
The source lays out this timeline, and honestly, when you see it like this, it is pretty strange. For about 70 years, from the 1850s into the early 20th century, local newspapers all across America were packed with these reports of huge skeletons being dug up from ancient mounds. Then, right around the time official institutions like the Smithsonian get involved, the reports just stop.
This really is the heart of the cover-up question. The source documents hundreds of these reports, from state after state, all describing skeletons from 7 feet to over 9 feet tall. If even a fraction of those were real, where did they all go?
Well, the indictment claims there was this simple, repeatable protocol. A farmer finds some bones. A local newspaper reports it. Then, an agent from the Smithsonian shows up, collects the evidence for further study, and the skeletons just vanish from history. The source alleges this exact pattern repeated over and over with chilling consistency.
Okay, but why? Why go to all that trouble? The indictment offers up two really powerful motives. First, giants just didn't fit the neat, clean, linear model of Darwinian evolution that was becoming scientific law at the time. And second, the idea of a prior, sophisticated civilization in America totally undermined the manifest destiny story that was being used to justify westward expansion. The giants, it argues, were a massive threat to both scientific and political orthodoxy.
All right, so now let's tie these two big exhibits together. We've got Exhibit A, the biological antenna in the human brain, and Exhibit B, the suppressed history of giants. The indictment's final move is to link them into a single, unified theory that basically reframes everything.
And here it is. The stunning conclusion is this. The giants weren't just bigger. They were a more advanced model of human. Their larger bodies and brains were the original, fully functional versions of that advanced hardware, like the brain antenna, that now lies mostly dormant inside of us. They were, in a sense, the masters of a science of consciousness that we've completely forgotten.
So, let's just recap the case here. The indictment argues that we all possess a latent biological antenna for information beyond our senses, that this hardware was once fully realized in a lost race of giants whose very existence has been scrubbed from our history books, and that this whole erasure wasn't just about hiding bones, it was an attack on our very understanding of human potential.
And that leaves us with one final and kind of chilling question to think about. If this indictment holds any water, if a race with these advanced abilities was intentionally written out of history, what does that imply about the dormant potential of that same biological hardware that's sitting inside your mind right now?